The industry has been hit by labor shortages from air traffic controllers to pilots to baggage handlers. Cancellations and delays piling up, though they eased a bit this weekend. For the month of June, daily airline cancellations were between 1% and 6%, while delays were near 20% of all flights, according to FlightAware. What can be done to improve travel in this country? Joining us now is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks for your time today. What measures should we expect?
So we're going to do everything that we can to support passengers and consumers. I spoke to the airlines after the problems we saw with Memorial Day weekend and spoke to them again going into the July 4th weekend, where we just saw some of the busiest travel days of the year. The numbers appear to have improved relative to Memorial Day, but still seeing an elevated level of cancellations. And some stories we're hearing from passengers that are just unacceptable in terms of their consumer experience. So we're going to continue using all of the authorities that are available to us as a department. And we're going to continue working on the air traffic control side to make sure that we're managing any assets that are under our control to get ahead of issues. For example, a few weeks ago in Florida, we saw a real perfect storm. Not just literally in terms of the weather, but there was a space launch going on at the same time as military operations, closing part of the airspace, plus air traffic control, staffing availability issues, and staffing shortages on the airline side. So we're working to get ahead of those kinds of things going into the rest of the summer and the fall, and seem to be seeing encouraging signs, but we can't let up.
Well, as we understand, even shortages at the FAA, part of your administration, our department, have contributed to those flight delays in Florida that you were mentioning. So what are you doing as an agency on that front to make sure that you're not a falter in this process? And how many of Senator Sanders' calls to action are actively being considered, things like requiring you to refund passengers for flights that are delayed for more than an hour?
So first of all, just to be very clear, air traffic control staffing issues do not explain the majority of the delays and cancellations we've been seeing. But when there is an issue, and as an aftershock from COVID, we have seen some impacts on staffing, we're working proactively and engaging the airlines to make sure that we're collaborating on that. A number of issues that we have seen appear to be related to the phenomenon of airlines letting airlines or pilots, or sometimes even pushing pilots into early retirement. And I think that's a source of frustration for the public because, of course, lots of taxpayer money went to these airlines precisely in order to keep people on the job and in order to keep those airlines running in a resilient way. So when the demand came back, they would be ready to respond. These are the kinds that issues that we're monitoring. You mentioned a letter from Senator Sanders. I saw it, gave him a call. We've talked about some of his ideas. Haven't seen all of the math come back on some of those proposals. But what I will say is we do have a lot of authorities for ensuring that passengers are protected. As a matter of fact, earlier, we issued the largest ever fines against airlines that failed to provide prompt refunds for passengers that they're entitled to. And we're going to continue making sure that the rules are followed and look to expand our toolkit whenever that's appropriate.
Secretary Buttigieg, it's Dom here. I wonder, there's no doubt in anyone's mind right now that this nation has been under a tremendous amount of stress from an infrastructure and economic standpoint over the last year, 2 years plus now. We've seen it on the energy infrastructure side with regard to soaring fuel costs and availability there. And we're seeing it here now with travel, not just in the air, but other parts as well. Do you feel as though your administration, the Biden administration, is now taking a look at some of the medium to longer term kind of, I guess, contingency plans that our nation may need to adjust or make, given the stresses that we've seen in things like energy and transportation, given these stresses now? Can they do anything differently? Can you folks do anything differently to make sure that this doesn't happen in the coming months, quarters, and years?
Well, that's exactly right. Look, there are immediate steps available to us when we're dealing with immediate issues that have been thrust upon us, whether we're talking about some of the problems with container shipping that were happening and affecting our supply chains, or whether we're talking about elevated levels of airline cancellations and delays. But what we've got to do is make the system more resilient because we don't know what the next shock to the system is going to be. We only know that the better our infrastructure is, the better we'll be poised to absorb it. Stay tuned for announcements very soon from my department on improvements that we're supporting for airport terminals, for example. They're going to help them become more sustainable and more efficient. This is exactly why we made the case for the bipartisan infrastructure law to begin with, whether we're talking about ports or airports or just roads, bridges, and rails. We have been paying the price for the decades of underinvestment, and we've got to work those long-term issues, even while we're acting more tactically and more immediately to get through the issues that we're seeing this month, this quarter, this year.
More efficient terminals sounds great, but I think people hope you mean efficient to move through, as well as, energy efficient and all the rest of it. There's been some question about going back to, I believe, the Obama administration when they have regulations for how long pilots and flight attendants can fly before they literally need to leave the aircraft, pack their bags, and go home. I don't know what the term is for this. Can you allow for a temporary reprieve, let's say, in these kinds of regulations that might help airlines meet their schedules better for the time being?
So I'm going to look at every option except any option that would compromise safety. And those are the discussions we're having in the department. When there are ways to update our regulations or our practices or our operations, we're always assessing that. What we're not going to do is consider any move that might feel good in the short term, but would undermine the safety of our air travel system. Traveling by air is pretty much the safest way to get around, period. And that didn't just happen on its own. It took a lot of hard work to get it that way. It takes a lot of hard work to keep it that way. And that is the bedrock commitment of the FAA. I believe fundamentally that safety mission is the main reason why my department exists in the first place.